Welcome to the Right to Reason podcast. I'm your host, Robert Stanley. Today, Freedom from Religion Foundation's own Dan Barker explains the subtle artistic cues within the religious music that we grew up with. Shelley Seagull follows up this conversation with a song that, according to the religion that she grew up with, she isn't allowed to sing. In 1 minute, you're about to hear why hymns are toxic.
It's the Right to Reason podcast.
Fuck your God! This episode of the Right to Reason podcast is brought to you by our patrons and contributors like me. We have all recognized the value of the unrestrained marketplace of ideas and have decided to make a difference. You can make a difference too. Contribute at patreon.com/right and learn more about your right to reason at therighttoreason.com. Your activism is appreciated.
Dan Barker, how are you, sir?
Oh, I'm doing just great. Thanks to nature.
Yeah, why do you say that?
I say that instead of saying thanks to God.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. Dan Barker is an American atheist activist and musician who served as an evangelical Christian preacher and composer for 19 years, but left Christianity in 1984. That was 1 year after I was born, Dan. That's
Really?
That's how young I am. And
Well,
I'm not even young.
then?
I'm 38. That's not even young. Is it? Is that young?
Well, so I actually became an atheist in my mind in the summer of '83. What month were you born?
April. So
Well,
pretty close.
so you were
Pretty
just
close.
a couple months old.
Yep. And you and your wife are co-presidents of the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Everybody can find that at, is it FFRF.org?
That's right.
And
Freedom
also-
from Religion Foundation, FFRF.
You can also check out Free Thought Radio, Free Thought Matters. That's a TV show. And you do a live Facebook Ask an Atheist show at 12 Central Time. That's every... What day?
Usually,
what day is that?
usually Wednesday at
Wednesdays.
12 noon Central.
Everybody can find those links in today's show notes. Dan, I wanted to ask you today about hymn songs. You wrote a bunch of songs yourself. My wife and I were just playing. Oh, what was that one you did? It was...
Well, I have one said, Just Say No to Religion. You mean since I was an atheist? You mean?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, Just Say No to Religion, or Life is Good, or I have one called Freedom from Religion. I have about 30 or 40 free thought songs, you would say, not hymns. But before that, I wrote Christian music too.
Wow. Anything I'd know?
Well, if you ever performed in your church or your Christian school, the musical Mary Had a Little Lamb, or His Fleece Was White as Snow.
Wow.
And of course, Mary's the mother of Jesus, and Jesus is the Lamb of God, so you get it, Mary Had a Little Lamb. You would know some of those, and I hear from people who said they sang them when they were kids.
Yes,
And they were published by Man and Music. Or I also wrote and produced a number of the VBS, if you know what that is, Vacation Bible School.
Yes.
For Gospel Light. So you may have grown up here singing some of those songs of mine
I
during your
remember
summer
Mary
vacation
Had a Little
Bible
Lamb.
school.
And it was, that was the analogy of Christ. Oh my God, that was you.
That was me. Did you ever do that? Did you ever hear that musical?
I know I have.
Wow.
I can't pull I don't think I ever participated in it, but I remember that. I remember Vacation Bible School. I remember the Wilds. Did you ever did your church ever participate in the Wilds? It was like a teenagers go out and into the woods, and
That must be like a denominational thing. Huh?
yeah, it was Independent Baptist, but I think we ran in very similar circles. You probably had Awana.
Well, yeah, I heard about Awana, and then there was also, what was the Assembly of God? They had a group. That's also different denominations have different ways of doing that. But yeah, and when I was a kid, of course, we went to the Christian camps I was in California, so we went up to the mountains of Southern California and communed with nature and communed with God and sang all those campfire songs to Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it just just at a human anthropological perspective, it was quite an enriching experience being with friends and being out there, and that was really exciting. I think people in most religions will tell you there was a lot of good about growing up in the faith.
Yeah. I miss the community. Even now, I've been out of the faith for at least 8 years now, but I do. I miss the music. I actually miss the music. I was going over some songs I wanted to play for you and get your opinion on them. This one right here, I used to love this song, and just playing it back, it just brought back a lot of memories. Tell me if you remember this classic.
Would you be free from the burden of sin? There's
Power in the blood. What a creepy concept, right?
Would you or evil a victory win? There's wonderful power in the blood.
Wonderful power in the blood. That one I thought, there's so many blood songs. What's with all the blood stuff?
Well, so that is an excellent point. In my new book that I'm writing, it's called The End of Worship. I have a chapter on hymns, especially Christian hymns. There are hymns in other religions too. The ancient Greeks had hymns too, to Zeus and Hera and so on. But Christian hymns that in the last couple of centuries, I wanted to know what were the most popular Christian hymns. And there's actually no way to know that. There's a whole bunch of online sites that say the 25 most popular Christian hymns or the 100 most popular or so on. And there's about 8 or 10 of those lists, and they don't all agree with each other. But anyway, I went through all of them, and I gathered pretty much maybe 100 that showed up in all those lists. And besides the words God and Lord, I was surprised to learn, and can you guess what is the most common word that shows up in these hymns, and at least in the popular hymns?
I'm guessing following the theme here, so it's blood, right?
It is blood. Blood shows up a lot in these hymns, and even in a lot of the gospel choruses, not just in the hymn books, but a lot of these more modern churches that are just singing gospel songs. The blood, there's something about the blood. Do you remember, there is a fountain filled with blood drawn from Emmanuel's veins, and sinners plunge beneath that flood, lose all their guilty stains. I sang that as a kid.
Yes.
Not even thinking, wait,
from
a fountain
his veins, a
filled
fountain
with blood. How many? I mean, how many pints does a human being have? How many deaths would that represent if a fountain was filled? It'd be hundreds and hundreds of people. And then you plunge beneath that flood, and you go underneath that blood, because it rhymes with flood, obviously.
Yeah.
It's a good songwriter's trick there. But you go beneath that flood, and then you lose all your guilty stain. But think how gross that is, if you were actually picturing that.
That's
and of course,
neat.
I would have said, well, that's symbolic. I mean, you're not actually jumping into a real fountain. It's just a songwriter's
but they're
way of
adding
expressing
in
it.
the concept of baptism with it too, right? Like you're immersing yourself in his blood.
Yeah.
That's really
Yeah.
What's this book going to be called?
That song that you just played, "Power in the Blood," I remember that from way back, and it's a very catchy tune. Really, but it's in the big picture, that song is a modern gospel chorus. It's in the hymn books. It's in a lot of hymn books, but it wasn't always. Back in the late 19th century, the hymns were much more traditional, and even before then, hymns were by many hymns were just limited to the actual words of the Bible. Like you would sing the Psalms. The Psalms were meant to be sung. And when these modern, quote-unquote, modern gospel choruses started coming along, singing words that were not in the Bible, but were just the opinion of the songwriter, if you know what I mean, that caused a controversy. And I think it's because something new is always controversial. When they started bringing guitars in the church, that was controversial. But the phrase, there's power in the blood, that actually doesn't appear in the Bible. That's not actually a biblical concept, except if you want to interpret it that way. Like in 1 Peter, it says, the blood of Jesus ransomed us, right? So I guess that's kind of a power. But that actual phrase, there's power in the blood, that is an interpretation or the thoughts of a songwriter. That's not actually the Bible. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, religions can do what they want. I mean, you can have art in your religion, and you can have expression. And I used to write those songs too. And even Handel, he took from the Hallelujah Chorus, Handel would take words from the Bible. And the government shall be upon his shoulders. He took Bible verses. Who goes around singing the word? Who goes around saying shoulders? I mean, that's a songwriter's trick. He took biblical words to set to old melodies that he had written, secular melodies before that, to express it. So, "Power in the Blood," it's a valid hymn. It's in the hymn books, and it expresses what most Christians would think, whether they think blood is gross or not. So, a lot of the hymns that I grew up singing, and you too, actually were like modern creations.
The second verse says, would you be free from your passion and pride? There's power in the blood. That one really spoke to me, because your passion and your pride, that's bad. But if you're free from that, then you that's a good thing. However, you're supposed to be passionate about this religion. The things that you feel naturally, those are bad, but you get to feel them for Jesus.
Yeah, you're right. But I think there's a bit of artistic play there with the alliteration. Passion, pride, power. So the songwriter was picking some words. And by passion, I would have thought when I was a minister, passion meant the human fleshly passions. You know what I mean?
Right.
Your human, instinctive, natural animal feelings. and your pride. That's what I would have thought. Of course, we wanted to be passionate for Jesus, but that was a spiritual passion, not an animal passion.
Full stop. What's the name of this book going to be?
Oh, the name of the book is, right now, it's called The End of Worship.
The End of Worship. And everybody will be able to find that on your FFRF.org website.
Yeah, or you can find it in the bookstores or in other places. Right now, it looks like Sterling Publishing is going to publish it.
Oh, nice.
And I should explain that title, The End of Worship, can be taken two different ways. So a believer can think about the end of worship like what is the chief end of man? It is to know and glorify God. The word end can be the aim or the goal, right? So the end of worship can be God. Or like when Sam Harris wrote his book, The End of Faith, or when Hector Avalos wrote his book, The End of Biblical Studies, end can be the termination, like the end of a love affair. It's over. So I'm writing the book in such a way that you can take it either way when you're learning about worship. And at the end, the final chapter is going to say, which way do you want to take it, and why would you? So would you consider the end of worship to be a good thing or a bad thing?
I don't know that worship is bad. Obviously, this propaganda crap, it's indoctrinating you with its alliteration and its metaphors and analogies to the scripture. But I don't know. That always seemed like my favorite part of church was the singing.
Well, because music is universal.
Yeah.
You can, even if you just hum the melody without knowing the words, you can find some not syntactical or lyrical meaning, but you can find some musical, emotional meaning in melodies, which can be very moving. And you don't even have to know what it's about. You can still just love those sounds.
Oh, here's another Blood one. Tell me if you remember this one. Got that evil guitar from the world in it.
Yeah.
See, we didn't have drums. That was the thing that was bad for us. Your generation was guitar. My generation, we couldn't have drums, and now there's just drums and rock bands and everything. But
Are you fully trusting in His grace this hour? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb?
Are you washed in the blood? I know that's
it was the best. Blood of the Lamb. Are your garments spotless? Are they white as snow? That's creepy, too. Are your garments spotless? Are they white as snow? Is that one biblical? Is that pulling from something biblical? The whiteness?
I think it probably is. I mean, you won't find those exact words in the Bible.
Yeah.
But, put on your holy garments. And it kind of doesn't matter if you think that a hymn or a gospel song is the expression of the believer. It's not the expression of God. It's the believer expressing his or her own feelings. So, yeah, you can get away with a lot doing that.
Mormonism has a lot to do with the white clothing, too. They wear the white robe at the temple. Their magic underwear, that's white. And they wear that every day.
It's purity. It doesn't have any blemish or color in it or anything. It's just supposed to be pure. Of course, white is a problem because it's hard to keep clean, isn't it?
Well, it probably has to do with bleeding from the vagina after losing virginity, I would assume. Of having something, well, I don't know. I'm just saying it's got to have something sexually related and something about the woman's body related to it, because everything antiquated seems to.
Well, I don't know about that. Maybe some people would see it that way. I think it's just in general, the angels are wearing white, that kind of thing, and God's hair is white, the Bible says, at least if you believe Daniel. So whiteness, I think, is sort of just a general color of not being dirty, being pure. You
don't think it's any reference to white supremacy or anything like that of early American colonial times when these songs were being written?
I actually don't think that was the intention, but I think that was often the usage. I think that's what was actually meant by people who were singing a lot of those songs. Yeah, there was a certain idea that white is pure and holy and that anything dark is the other. So yeah, white supremacy, of course, goes way, way back. The Southern Baptists became Southern Baptists because they wanted to continue owning slaves. And they admit that today, although you don't hear much of that from their pulpits. We just interviewed Robert P. Jones, who was raised Southern Baptist, and he very humbly and apologetically admits, yeah, my denomination was based on white supremacy and racism.
Wow.
And we're still struggling with that legacy today.
So I grew up in West Tennessee. Actually, have you ever heard, okay, hold on. I'm going to play it for you. Since we're playing songs, I might as well. Nutbush City Limits. Here it is. Check this out, Dan. Tina Turner. Let me fast forward a little. Highway 19. That's where I grew up. They did not keep it clean. That's not a city. Not for city limits. Yep. So anyway, I grew up there, and our house now it's not even like something like a big tourist attraction. It's just this old beat up shed looking house that just says birthplace of Tina Turner. Yeah, cotton gins everywhere, all fields full of cotton. And the church I went to, extremely racist. And my dad started as a preacher there. Oh, I don't know. I was in junior high, elementary school, late elementary school, I guess. But anyway, long story short, real KKK people there. Like you would drive down the street on a random Saturday night and see all these trucks in front of a house, and actually see them in their full white garb, just waving at the people going by. It was like, and this is now. This isn't 1920s, you know. It's crazy. And I remember he was not racist, and that was a problem for him. He would bring black people into the church, and the deacons would let him know on a regular basis that that's not appropriate. They don't need those kinds of folks in their worship service.
Yeah, well, Martin Luther King Jr. said that Sunday morning is the most segregated hour in the country. You know, people split by their race, and it's understandable, of course, historically, why those who were enslaved would embrace some parts of Christianity and love the church. And of course, the black church is a big, strong influence for a lot of blacks. But they tend to emphasize the parts of it that they identify with, like Moses said, "Let my people go." There's freedom. They tend to identify with that whole positive side of it rather than the more negative sides of the faith. So what are you going to do if you are an enslaved person and you have a community of different backgrounds, different religions, different cultures from different parts of Africa or different parts of the country? You find some unity in the church, and I think the church for blacks has been a very useful and usually very positive watering hole, you might say. It's a place where they could come together and feel safe and feel like a community and express some of those biblical concepts of freedom as they interpret it. You know, when I was growing up, we always sang the song, "Red and yellow, black and white, they are precious in His sight. Jesus loves the little children of the world." Yes. So we at least paid mouth service to the idea that everybody's the same. But that's different from when you go home on Sunday afternoon and live your daily lives. Yeah,
I always thought because it's the black church that seems to be the most outspoken against LGBTQ rights, even more than the white churches do. Yeah. You could have, an old-fashioned picture of saying we shouldn't have blacks and whites marrying each other, and a guy holding up a sign, protect the sanctity of marriage. Fast forward that to now, with just the idea of a black man holding up the sign, protect the sanctity of marriage, about having two men marry one another. The same theme being used, ironically, against someone else that had once been used against you.
So, yeah, well, that you're appealing to principle over emotion, and the Bible is very homophobic. So if you're going to believe the Bible literally, you don't have to, but if you're going to believe it literally, then you have to be opposed to homosexuality. But you referred to the African American culture. I don't think there is an African American culture. I think there's a whole bunch of them. In fact, more than 20% of African Americans are non-believers. So there's a whole bunch of, there's black atheists and black humanists and black, Sikivu Hutchinson's group and Mandisa Thomas's group. And even within the black churches, there are liberals and there are conservatives. So I know what you're trying to say, but it'd be like trying to stereotype all atheists as thinking the same way.
Right.
But historically, I think if we look at, quote unquote, the black church, the conservative black church, I think you could make some valid points there.
Sure, for sure. Yeah, not a monolith, right? That's for sure. But there's definitely an anti-gay theme within the black community. I mean, that doesn't seem bizarre to point out.
Maybe we could say that homophobia is overrepresented, that there's a higher percentage of it within certain minority groups. Maybe we can say that.
Yeah, even better to say minority, because you certainly see it within Hispanic cultures as well. And once again, not a monolith, but maybe you know what that makes me think of? I asked my my poli-sci instructor this question once. I said, how is it that it seems like black folks and Hispanic folks, they seem to have a hard time getting ahead with civil rights, whereas the gays I mean, it was this boom right around, post 80s or late 80s, early 90s, the AIDS epidemic and what have you. But this huge push for equal rights, and it seems so much more successful than other civil rights campaigns. I mean, they've got the, maybe call it figurative, but they've got, the rainbow flag on the White House and gay marriage legalized, within the same lifetime as the AIDS epidemic, where they were saying, we're not being taken care of, and Rush Limbaugh's making fun of them on the air. And, it's such a divide. And then they've made so much progress in a short amount of time. How did that happen? And what he said is within the gay community, there's a lot of well-to-do white people. So they had the privileged white people and white males that were able to help their cause, whereas the African-American community hasn't had that much of an advantage because they didn't have rich white guys. Yeah,
there may be some point to that. Or maybe it's just that racism is a harder nut to crack than homophobia. I don't know.
Maybe.
Overall. I don't know if I would suggest any solutions or explanations for that, but it does seem a little bit ironic to me that a group of people who were enslaved by Christians holding Bibles in one hand and a whip in the other would be so eager to embrace the slave master system of the Christian religion in the first place, that they would still want to bow down before a Lord and Master and assume those postures of prayer. If you look at the postures of prayer, they're really the same as the postures of slavery. You bow your head, you kneel down, you prostrate yourself, you put your wrists together like like your wrists are shackled, showing that you are no threat to the master, that you are humble and obedient and submissive, and you even close your eyes and you make yourself small before the master, and then you make the master large, which is basically a lot of Christian hymns are that way. How great thou art, and God is great and I am a wretch, I am a worm. You see a lot of that kind of self-denigration within a lot of the hymns in Christian sermons, and you see it, in a lot of the conservative black or white, red or yellow, black or white churches. You see that same idea of that we have to bow down and that we need to submit to show how good you are and how great He is. And historically, don't we? I mean, just naturally as human beings, don't we applaud and celebrate the people who are breaking free from slavery?
Right.
Look at Spartacus. Look at that story of Spartacus in ancient Rome, or look at what was his name in Haiti, Louverture, or Ned Turner, or some of these other people who were revolted.
Right.
We say, go for it, break free from the master and the slaves and the chains and escape. Of course, there's a lot of danger there if you try to do that. And yet, then we go back to church and we submit, and we forget what happened with the American Revolution, which was partly religious because the King of England was the king of the church as well. With the American Revolution, we decided, wait a minute, we're not going to have a sovereign Lord, Master, King above us. In our country, we're going to have we the people. We the people are the highest level. And so we proudly fought this American Revolution to break free of these bonds. And it's very clear in the Declaration of Independence, the consent of the governed. So we celebrate that. We're proud of the fact that we are rebellious, that we're naughty children who are disobeying daddy. You know what I mean? For the
Right.
King of England. And yet then we go to church. A lot of people go back to church and they still want to submit to a king and a Lord and a master and a sovereign in their lives as if that were a good thing. That seems to me to be a paradox.
Interesting, like how closely nationalism seems to be tied in with people's religiosity, especially in Christianity. Like, I always thought it was funny. Once songwriters got wind that the stripes on the American flag could be analogous to, like, by His stripes we are healed and the stripes of Christ being whipped. Like, once they put that connection, it was all over.
Well, there you go.
It's on
that
every
explains
song.
it, doesn't it?
Oh, here's a creepy one. Tell me if you recall this one. Speaking of attaching your nationalism with your religiosity. Onward, Christian soldier, marching as to war. Forward into battle, see his banners grow. That one's interesting to me because if you're taking this militaristic take on it, you're marching against a foe. Well, we know the foe's probably demonic in nature. We wrestle not against, how'd that verse go? We wrestle against...
Wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities
Yes.
and powers.
Yes. But if you're fighting against an invisible enemy, anybody that's not on your team clearly is in support of that bad guy. So this militaristic kind of song helps justify any kind of attack you'd want to do against another person. It helps justify that kind of anybody that's not believing our faith is part of the bad guys team.
But you probably remember, as I do, that anyone who would sing a song like that, as I did, really does think that they've got something special, that they really are on the right side. You truly believe it. It's in your heart. It brings tears to your eyes. And not knowing, of course, that this harkens back to our tribal ancestry, where we needed the warriors to protect us from the invaders who might come and steal our property, our crops, our land, our wives, or whatever. So, as human animals, of course, we have those instincts, but to dress it up with religion and to think, of course, that I have the loving religion, the good religion, our King, our Lord, our Master is the good Father. And so we need to make sure that we are fighting against all of those foes, as the song put it, those enemies out there. And it makes you kind of well up with pride and tears and joy, and you're part of this. If you're in the military, you're not in control. You have a commander. Christ the royal master leads against the foe, it says. So you are a submissive follower of a military system, and you are marching in the righteous cause. So when you heard those women singing that song just now, they weren't really singing militaristically. They were singing more almost like a happy love song when you heard their voices, right? Yay, onward Christian soldiers. Isn't this sweet? Kind of.
No anger or rage in the song, but in the lyrics itself, it's very, very regimented, very, very war-based, I guess.
Well, the God of the Bible is a God of war. So you can see that over and over and over again, commanding, much of the Old Testament is just military stuff. The genocides and the killing and the occupation of territory and the ethnic cleansing and the destruction of their altars and their religions, and all of that stuff was very colonial, aggressively colonializing other people, getting them out of the way. So if you are a true Christian who believes in the Bible, you've got to believe that. You've got to believe God sent us out here to do this, to fight this war.
My Jesus is soft, but my God kicks ass. That's the kind of concept you have to have that dual thought process going on. Here's another one. This one's not so much as creepy. It's not like the creepy blood stuff, but it's bizarre to me. It wasn't bizarre to me at the time, but hearing it now, I'm like, what are they saying? What are they really talking about?
Stood an old rugged cross, the emblem of suffering and shame. How I love that old cross, where the dearest and best for a world of lost sinners was slain.
So even just hearing that brings back such good memories, to be honest. I loved singing that one. But it's still just weird. The old rugged cross where I lay my trophies down. How does it go?
That's the expression of a artistic songwriter, basically. It's a human being, trying to put into words his or her feelings toward Jesus and his death. And, who knows if it was an old rugged cross. They might have just cut that timber right then, right? It might have been a new shiny cross. That doesn't sound as good, does it?
No.
But because it was 2,000 years ago, we think of it as an old rugged cross. Does the word blood come up? I'm trying to think.
I'm not seeing blood anywhere. It talks a lot about suffering, a lot about shame. This one's interesting. Till my trophies at last I lay down, I will cling to the old rugged cross and exchange it someday for a crown. That promise of getting stuff later. That's the funniest one to me, because I'll bring that up to my dad, who's still a Christian now, or other believers that I talk to. I'll say, you guys you really want those crowns, don't you? You want that mansion you're going to go live in one day. That paradise concept. I could justify any behavior whatsoever if I knew I'm saving you from everlasting hell, and I'm going to be rewarded in heaven for it. And so are you. You'll get that too. There's nothing on this planet that would not be worth doing to that end.
Well, yeah, especially if you believe that your commander, Christ the royal master, tells you to do it. Yeah. And by the way, I think the Jesus of the New Testament wasn't as warm and fuzzy as we like to portray him. But the attitude of the old rugged cross, and a lot of songs, and not just Christians, but in other religions as well, is that things are bad here. Things are horrible. My life isn't like I want it to be. It's tough. And that's kind of true for a lot of people. Things are tough and things aren't that way. And so you want some hope for a future where things are going to be glorious and better. And I think that's underlies a lot of religious theology and teaching and religious songs. So I did a debate up in Stevens Point a few years ago. And after the debate with this local pastor, another pastor came up to me and he said, well, if what you say is true, what do I tell my congregation who needs hope? What kind of hope can I offer them? What kind of hope are you offering them? And I think that's the sentiment behind that song. Life is bad and I'm a sinner and things aren't going well, but someday I'm going to wear a crown. Someday we're going to live in that glorious future. So I said two things to that pastor. I didn't have much time to formulate it, but I said, first of all, that truth is not determined by hope. You don't decide what's true or false based on what gives you the most hope. Right. I mean, the truth might, in fact, be totally pessimistic. Are you going to not agree with it because you would rather have hope? But the second thing I said very briefly before I had to leave was atheists and agnostics have hope. We offer hope to the world, and it's realistic hope. We're not going to lay our trophies down at some cross. We're going to get to work making sure that this is the best possible world we can make it right now, if we can. At least we can try. So we do have hope that we might have a future that's free of global warming or climate change. A hope that where racism is diminished, where women are fully equal. I mean, we have hope for a lot of things that we can work for that make a real difference, that make sense and have value in the real world.
I'm with you. I love everything you just said. And you said it so well. I feel like maybe you're a little optimistic about humanity. And I hear this from a lot of you prominent atheist types, Dan. I can't think of a better way to say it. A lot of you the leaders within the atheist community. I've certainly always thought of you that way. And I hear you say these kinds of things where you say, the pro-secular theme. And I feel like maybe you guys are missing the fact that we as atheists, like atheism is a privileged position, right? Not only are we intelligent enough to get it, or and those not all of us are all that intelligent. Some of us just didn't get indoctrinated with it from the beginning, and there's just stupid atheists, but there's still, they were privileged enough to not have religion thrust upon them. But the people that got out of that religion, I would say that's a rare level of intelligence that you don't find typically within most of humans, being able to leave your religion behind, right? We're also highly educated group of people, right? A highly educated group of people, typically. So it's a privileged position, and I feel like whenever you guys say secularism is better, where I agree with you, ultimately, yes, but taking away what religion does offer the stupid masses, the people that really need it, like they're not going to care about climate change. They don't even know what that means. We had to change that for them from global warming because they were so stupid that they couldn't think, oh, well, it's winter, global warming's faults. You know what I mean? Like these kinds of people, they need, I think, maybe I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, I think they need to have that fantasy paradise just to keep going in life.
Well,
is that too cynical?
I think you make a good point. Although I would not want to phrase it in such a condescending way, because there's a lot of smart Christians, a lot of highly educated, intelligent believers who are good people. We know that. I think what you and I are aiming at are the extremist fundamentalist types, because within the Christian religion, they're not stupid. I mean, I was one. I was a believer. I wasn't stupid. I wasn't dumb at all.
But
and
were
I
you
do
skeptical?
know that in many of the causes that I march for, I am joined by local believers, Jews and Christians and others, who march for the same causes. So I'm not very likely to find a fundamentalist Bible believer marching next to me, but I will find a lot of Episcopalians and other mainstream and maybe even some evangelicals. I mean, one of my brothers is an evangelical Christian who is one of the 20% of evangelicals who did not vote for Donald Trump, if you know what I mean. Most of them did.
Right.
So they're not all dumb, crazy, Southern gospel hymn singers. But my answer to this pastor was that there is hope. Maybe my optimism is overrated. I'll grant you that. Maybe I'm too optimistic. But at least if you're trying, at least if you have a goal, even if you don't make it, or even if you can't make it, at least if you're trying to improve the world in some way, to make life better, to alleviate what a lot of these hymn singers think is a horrible world that we live in and we need a heaven to go to. At least if you're trying, you are aiming toward a goal of minimizing harm and lessening oppression. then you are living a meaningful life and you have hope. Hope doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get what you hope for. And it certainly doesn't mean that for Christians. Christians can have all the hope they want in eternity. They're not going to get it. And maybe a lot of us atheists are hoping for things that we're never going to get it. But at least we have hope. At least I could say that to that man. We do have something we can work toward. And it doesn't have to be a faith in a God.
It's a beautiful note to end on. Dan Barker, a good friend of yours, I understand you guys did an album together, Shelley Seagull. I told her I was talking to you, and she was ecstatic. She says, "Oh yeah, and I love Dan." And she sent us a recording. I was hoping to close us out with that recording, and also to let you know, thank you so much for coming on today, everybody. Once again, in the show notes you will find FFRF.org, Free Thought Radio, Free Thought Matters, Ask an Atheist link. That's a Facebook Live on Wednesdays at 12 Central. Is that right, sir?
Wednesdays usually at 12 Central. And our website is facebook.com/4FFRF, the Facebook page. That's the number 4FFRF. Our national website is FFRF.org.
Hi, Robert. Thanks so much for inviting me to perform a song today for you and your audience. Hi, everyone. It's nice to be here. I think it's a really interesting discussion, to look at the music that is involved in liturgy and worship and the impact that it can have and what are the underlying messages. It's interesting for me growing up in the synagogue. We sang all of our songs in Hebrew. Interestingly enough, I myself wasn't allowed to sing unaccompanied. I was allowed to sing along with the congregation, as all women are, but at the Orthodox synagogue I attended, as I think I've told you and your listeners before, women aren't allowed to lead the service. They're not allowed to sing unaccompanied. So, I have my own issues with, religious singing. But for the songs that I was allowed to participate in and in the singing that I grew up with, it's all in another language. So you still get the impact of being part of this really moving and powerful shared experience and shared singing. However, you're not as aware of the messages behind them because a lot of people don't speak Hebrew. They aren't familiar with the meaning behind the song. And so you get this benefit that, makes you feel close to the community, but you're not necessarily, thinking critically about the messages behind them if you understand them at all. Yeah, that was just something interesting I wanted to add from my perspective. The song I'd like to sing for you today is a song that my father sings every week in the synagogue. It's in Hebrew, and it's called Etz Chaim. It's a beautiful song. It's about the Torah being the tree of life. And I'm able at this stage in my life to appreciate it for its beauty. And in a way, I sing it to critique, to challenge the tradition that doesn't allow me to sing it as a lead. And I incorporate it into my shows at different venues that I play. So this is Etz Chaim. Thank you again for having me.
Etz Chaim hi umachasikim bo utomatecha ma'usha darechecha darchenam ulchom nivotecha shalom hashivenu Adonai elecha abnu tshuva chadesh yameinu kekedem chadesh yameinu כקדם חדש ימינו
Thank you to Dan and Shelley. Thank you to Dave Blair at DaveBlairMusic.com. Thank you to FeedSpot.com for promoting the Right to Reason to the Top 10 Atheist podcast. Thank you to our patrons, Jason Parker, Freethinker215, Alan Marks, Bernard Lamberell, Philip Spawn, Anima Man, Larry Wilson, and our top supporter, Rob Montgomery. I wanted to thank our new patron, Brittany Catherman, supporting us at $10 an episode, but we just got another one at $5, Catherine Class. That doesn't detract from my gratitude to you, Brittany, but thank you also, Catherine. You can support this broadcast at patreon.com/right and learn more at therighttoreason.com. Next week, we'll discuss and debate the mental pretzel-like strategy required to defend the book of Genesis with Christian apologist Tyler Vela. Between now and then, remember that you have the right to reason.
This is the Right to Reason podcast.